Hi guys, how you doing? I'm just making this wee video to go with today's email around fat loss and ways to approach it, because I've had a couple of emails recently this week of people just asking for a wee bit of guidance on calorie targets and a bit of advice about how they're going to lose a bit of body fat essentially in the lead up to the summer, because I understand that this is probably the time that most folk are really sort of thinking about it a bit more with beach holidays coming up and stuff. So I've got the email here, so I'm just going to go through the bullet points that I've written down in the email and just take them one by one and try and elaborate on each one. Hopefully it'll answer some questions, it'll bring a bit of clarity. If it doesn't, just email me back and we can maybe try and figure things out if you're still a bit unsure. But whatever dietary approach you take, at the end of the day, there's probably a few different ways of doing it. You've probably seen it and read about all the different ways of thinking there's a magic formula. There's not really a magic formula as such, to be honest. There's no one approach that's better than the other, but there is a few fundamental principles and guidelines that you need to adhere to achieve success, regardless of what approach you take. So first and foremost, like if you're trying to lose excessive body fat or a wee bit of excess body fat, then you need to be taking in less calories, I guess, in terms of food than your body is burning. And if you're eating a lot more than your body requires, then that's when you start to gain a bit of excess weight. So, and it can be a slow process that gradually creeps up over time. I'm aware that other things come into it, hormones, age, particularly for women who are going through the perimenopause or the menopause, like it becomes more difficult. But for the scope of this email, I'm just trying to talk about the actual approaches themselves in terms of like how to manage these, because fundamentally, even with the interaction of hormones and things like that, the fundamental principles still remain, if that makes sense. So you're wanting to try and figure out a way of getting into some sort of calorie deficit. That's the sort of buzzword that everyone talks about, but you don't necessarily need to track all your calories. So there was a few folk have actually been in touch recently that have said they don't want to do that. There's a few folk that made great progress at the last block who I asked what they did, and two of them that I can think of said they didn't track calories at all. They just followed some of the principles that we're just going to quickly go through here, and the more mindful eating approach. And the main thing about the more mindful eating approach that doesn't require calorie tracking is just to try and make sure that you're prioritising protein rich meals, and that's for your breakfast, your lunch and your dinner. When I say you don't need to track, you do need to have at least some semblance though of awareness of how much you're consuming from a protein point of view, in order to get enough that's going to it's going to facilitate fat loss by protecting your existing muscle tissue. Because if you lose weight and you don't focus on a higher protein diet, yeah, you might lose some weight if you're in a deficit, so to speak, but a lot of that weight, or a higher proportion of that weight you lose, will be muscle, which is completely undesirable. Whatever you do, you want to try and maximize the fat that you're losing and preserve the muscle, because it's like gold in your body, and it becomes more like gold in your body with every 10 years that you age, because you'll lose it at a rate of about 10% per decade. So it's really important that you can't just go on a 1200 calorie diet or 10,000 calorie a day diet of soup and not consider the protein intake at all, especially if you're female, and especially if you're probably above the age of 40, I'd say. So the guideline is, as I said, this email is 1.5 grams to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Okay, so if you weigh 70 kilos, it would be 1.5 to 2 grams of that. So 70 kilos times 1.5, or 70 kilos times 2 would be 140. That would give you your grams amount of protein that you want to try and aim for. So put that in context, a chicken breast has probably about 35 to 40 grams. Okay, so just to give you a wee idea, 4 eggs would maybe have about 24 grams, that kind of thing. So that can maybe give you a bit of visual context to the practical implications of that amount of protein in your diet. But that is what you need to aim for. And if you're not trying to at least aim for that, then you're already swimming against the tide. Not just from a preserving muscle point of view, but also because protein is the most satiating nutrient of all the nutrients, and that includes like fibers, carbohydrates and fats. So what that means is it basically keeps you fuller for longer. It literally alters, I mentioned the word hormone briefly at the start, it literally alters hormones. It will influence hormone production. In this case, it will affect the hunger hormones. The main one being ghrelin, another one being leptin, which is just sort of signal to say you're full, but ghrelin. So ghrelin and leptin are two important hormones, but it's been studied over and over and over again there's been dozens of studies showing that a higher protein diet essentially dampens your production of ghrelin, saying that you need to eat more, so it literally reduces your appetite. So that is a couple of reasons why it's really important that you focus on a high protein diet. I've also mentioned there that you have to be mindful, because quite commonly when I see some people, it's food diaries, they'll opt for protein sources that they've maybe read online. It's got a bit of protein in it. Oh, great, I'll have that. And it's things like peanut butter. Peanut butter is not a good source of protein. It's an additional, maybe something you could, maybe a small amount you could put on a snack that will maybe give you a bit of something you enjoy. It's a tasty thing. It's got some good vitamins in it. It's got a bit of fibre in it. It's got some fats in it, but it's not a good source of protein. A good source of protein for me would be, in what should make up the majority of your diet, is a source of protein that is maybe between 20 to 40 grams of protein per serving, and is also not high in, or is more high in protein than it is in fat. So, because otherwise the overall calorie intake will be difficult to adhere to if you're also like consuming higher protein foods that are also high in fat. So for example, like beef steak, like it's good, it's healthy in moderation. When I say moderation, I mean maybe a couple of times a week. But if you were to make that your main source of protein, or staple, I'm talking about staple foods that you're going to consume maybe once or twice a day, then it would be very difficult for you to achieve what you're trying to achieve for that, because the amount of protein you're trying to aim for wouldn't be achievable without also consuming a food that's also very high in fat and calories as well. So it has to be leaner cut. You have to be thinking about leaner proteins, like eggs, chicken, turkey, tuna, variety of different things. I'm aware if you're vegetarian, you'll need to be a bit more creative with your diet, but it's entirely achievable. But you need to be mindful of, like, at least mindful. You don't need to track it necessarily, but you do need to be mindful of what it is you're actually consuming, in terms of the rough contents. And then went on to mention like the amount of vegetables and fibrous carbs. So I briefly touched upon the fact that like fibre is also really good for like controlling your hunger levels, and so it can keep you fuller. But on top of that, it's absolutely imperative you have it for your gut health, so it aids in digestion. So if you're consuming a higher protein diet, then almost by default you need to then include a lot of vegetables as well, or at least a lot more fibre than you might be usually consuming. You need to make a conscious effort, in other words, to have more vegetables in your diet. I don't mean just sit and have plates of broccoli, because that will have the same effect as not having any fibre, i.e. it will bag you up. So again, it's about getting a bit of a balance, but you should be trying to sprinkle your plate with lots of vegetables, whether that's tomatoes, peppers, onions, courgettes, cucumber, whatever floats your boat. Find vegetables that float your boat, right, and then try and consume them on a daily basis. Some fruit as well, obviously your berries, strawberries, grapes, banana. These are all, and apples. These are all sources of fibre that will also give you like a decent chance to also feel a bit more satiated and full, because there's nothing worse than trying to stick to an eating plan. If you're starving all the time, it makes adherence much harder, weeks and weeks down the line. So these are just some of the things to consider. Learn to cook some basic meals, whether it's like chicken and veg stir fries with rice and vegetables like peppers, etc., carrots. Fajitas I find is quite a good option for a dinner. Try and find, I made one the other night. I just bought not fajitas, I bought a curry paste thing, a curry flavouring thing, can't remember what it was called. And I just boiled up some potatoes, boiled up some chicken, didn't boil up chicken, actually fried some chicken, fried some peppers, courgettes, and the chicken, put it all together with the boiled baby potatoes, threw in the curry paste, and it was delicious. It was, but there's loads of these sort of things in the supermarkets that you can just add a lot of flavour to your meals. So that's just an example. There's loads of examples out there. If you want some further examples, you can always ask. You can always look on the community page on Facebook, because I know there's stuff on there as well. So, and the last point I've made there is, or the last 2 points, is that you need to also be mindful of the oils you're using. So obviously if you're having a stir fry, you're going to use some olive oil or rapeseed oil or some sort of oil. But you need to be mindful of how much, because if you're just going blah, 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 suddenly you've added 350 calories to your meal and you don't even realise it, and you might not even be aware of it. So just a little goes a long way when it comes to the cooking oils. And the last one is, the amount of times I've asked, I'll say to people, how's your diet? This is over the years generally, how's your eating going? And they'll say they're good. I'm just going, well, I've been really good. I've not had any chocolate, I've not had any biscuits. It's like, that does not mean you've got a good diet, just because the absence of these foods is not what's good. It's the inclusion of everything we've just spoken about above. And what you'll find is if you can more proactively focus on including more protein-rich diet, more vegetables and fruits, etc., etc., you'll find that by default you'll end up eating less of the junk anyway, because you're more satiated, you're more satisfied, you've got more energy, your cravings will drop anyway, so you'll eat less of the junk food anyway. I'm not saying don't cut out junk food, but I'm saying that should be like a byproduct of being more proactive in what you are eating as opposed to what you're not eating. So being good does not mean I'm not eating junk food, so my diet's good. It's just not the same, because whatever happens, you'll replace it with something else anyway. So that's a bit more of that's a bit about that's a general sort of, in a nutshell, what a mindful approach to eating sort of entails. Obviously you need to be drinking lots of 2 to 3 litres of water a day as well. It's just about being consistent with it, finding meals you enjoy, that you find tasty, that doesn't require a huge amount of effort on your part to do on a daily basis. The key is to find staples that you can do on a daily basis that you enjoy. That is about it. I've obviously not mentioned like the step count in relation to fat loss. I'm trying to stick to just nutrition, but the step count is something you'd also obviously want to consider. Just try and add 1,000 steps to your current daily average. See how you get on in a week. If you're finding that time, the additional time of those extra 1,000 steps isn't too much, especially now that it's nice and sunny, add on another 1,000 and just try and get to a point where you're upping your step count gradually. I don't want to suddenly say you do 15,000 steps a day if for all I know you only do 4,000 a day. That would be a really unrealistic, enormous habitual change to go from 4,000 to 15,000. It would take you, and it would add like an extra hour of walking to your day, possibly even more than an hour. So it's better to implement like changes, smaller changes over time, and that literally kind of walk before you can run. So if you're doing 4,000 a day, see if you can get to 6,000 and then take it from there. The good news is there's a law of diminishing returns when it comes to steps. So the benefit you'll feel from going from 3,000 or 4,000 to 10,000, i.e. 6,000 extra steps a day, is much, much greater than someone that's going from 10 to 16,000. Still 6,000 steps a day increase, but the diminishing return rule means that you'll get much more benefit. So it's worth doing. So that's another reason not to compare yourself to others. If you go from 4 to 8 or 4 to 10 and you're like, oh, this is crap because I'm not doing 16,000 that person's doing, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. That's doing you the world of good to increase it by that. Okay, very quickly I'm going to try and just touch upon the next bit, the tracking macros approach. Okay, so this has probably been the most popular approach in the fitness industry for a long time now. It's come full circle. It went ridiculous about 2016, 2017. Everyone was talking about flexible dieting and the madness of it, advertising their diet as eating ice cream and all that. Luckily, studies have caught up with it and they've now debunked all that. You can't just eat what you want as long as it's not good. It's harmful to just eat processed foods, even if you're in a calorie deficit. It's a study just done probably about 2 weeks ago on it. Anyway, my point is the tracking macros approach is a really good option for a variety of reasons. It's definitely a good option for people that have done the above that we've just mentioned, and they come and say, I don't know why I'm not losing any weight. I'm doing so well. I'm eating really good. I'm only eating this, and this. Nothing's happened. That's a month down. I've not seen any changes. If that sounds like you're a candidate for tracking macros, and that is because if you think you're eating less than you need to be eating to lose body fat, and it's not happening, then it means that you're not actually doing it. It's just that you don't realise you're not doing it, and that's tracking can unpack all that. Because as annoying as it might be, I forgot the word I wanted to use there. Tedious as it might be, you need to weigh everything before you consume it. So you need to literally ascertain exactly how much you're consuming by weighing the food before you eat it, and then you're going to be able to work out from there how many calories you're actually consuming. And everyone I've ever come across that's ever done it has said it's been an eye-opener. They didn't realise how much was actually in the food they're eating. It could be something simple like the bowl of pasta you have for dinner. It's like a lot more than you realised. Or the bowl of cornflakes, you think you're in a small... I mean, have you ever read the back of the packet of cornflakes if you had something to eat cornflakes? Like per serving, it's a 30 gram serving. Like it's tiny. It's the serving of an actual that they're suggesting you eat is minute. No one's going to get full on that, so they end up eating double that or even 3 times that. Notwithstanding the fact that it's low in protein, it's not an ideal. It's probably not the best option anyway. But it's very easy to overeat on things that you think you're not overeating on, simply because they've got more in them than you realise. So that is where it comes in. It's very useful for things like, as I said, oils. I mentioned them. Like if you haven't actually measure how much oil you're actually using, you'll be amazed if you were to pour it in and measure how many millilitres it actually is and what that equates to in terms of calories. Same with nut butters, butter in general, all these things. So that is where tracking is extremely useful. It can also keep you really accountable as well. If you're got your target and you're doing it every day and you are having to like type it in, suddenly you're like, oh, actually, I've already eaten what I'm allowed to eat today based on my target, so I can't eat anymore. You just simply can't do it. So you can't. So if you know in advance. Whereas if you're not tracking, you don't even think about it. Especially if you get kids, you've made dinner for them and there's excess food. If you're like me, I'm a nightmare for it if I'm hungry. Instead of waiting to eat my own dinner, if I'm really starving, I'll just end up eating a bit of theirs. Before I know it, I've probably overeaten way more than I should have. And that's the sort of thing that wasn't an issue before children, right? Because you didn't have another dinner sitting there. You just make your own and that's it. But I find myself constantly, especially I think sleep comes into play here as well. And I find when you're not getting enough sleep, which I don't often do, or at least I often feel quite tired because I'm up at 5 a.m. every morning, that plays into cravings and food choices 100%. So if you're the less sleep you get, again, it's been studied, I'm not just like hypothesizing here, it's been studied that if the less sleep you get, they've literally put like things in the brain and to measure what sensors light up in the brain when you see specific foods when you're had your less than 7 hours a night, and they've seen that the pleasure centers in the brain light up brighter when they see pictures of like junk food, processed food, sugar, chocolate, donuts, cakes, etc. when they've had less sleep than when they have more sleep, 7-8 hours a night, the pleasure centers in the brain for those foods when they see them don't come up as much. They're not as amplified as much. So it literally does impact you on your food choices if you're not getting enough sleep. And you think that you're making a conscious choice to eat those foods. And in some respects you are, right? But there's a subconscious like brain signal saying, I want that, I need that. And if you're not being really accountable and tracking everything, then the chances are you're just going to take it, which is what I do. And it's part of the reason why I'm thinking I'm going to have to eventually be a bit more strict with myself, because it's not getting any easier. Especially nursing a few injuries, can't train quite the same at the moment. And yeah, so these are the things, these are some of the things you need to consider. I also mentioned that the other aspect of this is that there's people that maybe come and train for a while, have gone down the tracking route, achieved terrific results, and maybe now are just got in a habit or got in the mindset that they don't want to go back to what they were, and they're kind of terrified of regaining body fat. They don't want to regain, and then they get into this mindset of just constantly thinking about their steps and their calories, and it becomes a vicious circle whereby you can't really get out and remember, wait a minute here, there's another aspect to the whole muscle building, body composition thing, and that is the anabolic time, where you're trying to actually get leaner by building muscle, which you can't do if you're constantly in a deficit, plus it's quite debilitating that mentally to constantly be worrying about that. So there's probably people that I actually think would benefit from eating more, because they're lean and they've not got a lot of excess body fat left, and actually really they should be trying to build up and eat more to facilitate strength gains. You can't continue to get strong if you're constantly in a deficit and constantly thinking about fat loss. It can happen for a while, but there comes a point where you've got to say, actually no, I need to just take a step back here and actually fuel my body with more food to allow me to perform better, to get stronger, to build lean muscle, to therefore improve my body composition even more, because my body fat will stay the same, but if I increase a wee bit of muscle by a couple of pounds, my body fat percentage overall is going to come down. So that's about it in a nutshell. I don't want to go on 18 minutes, 19 minutes long this video. If that's piqued your interest or at least made you question a few things more, then feel free to ask me and I'll make another video, or we'll speak directly. I don't mind. So there's a few things to consider. Hope this has helped. Any questions are really specific about foods in particular, just reach out to me and ask, and we'll get the ball rolling with whatever it is you're wanting to try and achieve. But yeah, anything in this video that has like raised a question in your head, please just don't be scared to ask. Do not be scared to ask, either in person or WhatsApp or whatever. Sometimes like WhatsApp's good because then I can just send a voice note back instead of like having to get into my emails and all that. But anyway, see you soon.